Welcome back to Forces of Flight. This is your host, Dustin Drews, and today we'll be covering flight schools, Part 61 or Part 141. Which one's best for you? So, flight schools, Part 61 and Part 141. So, here's the difference that most of us can understand getting into aviation. Back in high school, you probably took a course called driver's education. One way you could take that course is pay somebody privately that had their driver's ed teaching certificate through the state. Another way you could take your driver's ed course is in a class at the local high school. Both of them gave you a certificate that said you completed driver's education. The difference is one of the certificates come from a high school and the other certificate come from an instructor. The insurance company really didn't care if you went through a private instructor or a high school. They gave you the same discount. Flight schools are no different. The FAA don't care if you go through a Part 61 school or a Part 141 school. You're going to get the same license from each school. So we're going to cover both of the types of schools and what you can expect, the pluses, the minuses, and hopefully at the end of this, you can figure out what school is best for you. Your CFI, or Certified Flight Instructor, is going to be the most important part of your training. So, I don't care if you're going Part 61 or Part 141. Be sure your flight instructor is who you vision as a flight instructor. The reason I say this, if you're an older gentleman and you don't like to be taught by some young whippersnapper, find an older instructor, somebody that relates to you. If you're a male and you're intimidated being taught by a female, get a male instructor. Same thing with a female. If you're intimidated by a male, find a female instructor. Your instructor is going to be the most important part of your training. Pick one out, find one that you get along with, and that fits what you want in an instructor. You're going to spend at least 40 hours with them in an airplane, so make sure you got one you enjoy. So Part 61, this is like that private guy that teaches you driver's ed on nights and weekends. Okay, what is it? Part 61 is part of the FARs, right, that list out the minimum requirements it's going to take for you to become a pilot. Some of the positives of Part 61 are greater flexibility. Generally, you're dealing with one person, small operations, that gives instruction on nights and weekends. A lot of times, Part 141 programs don't offer training on the weekends. Generally, it's a smaller operation, and I think that's a good thing because a smaller organization usually gives you better customer service. You're treated more special because there's less people for you to worry about. It's less structured. The reason I say that's a good thing, can be a bad thing too, depending on your instructor, is you can focus on the stuff that you need to focus on instead of rushing through in a checkbox manner through your training. Another good thing about this is you can take lessons in your own aircraft. You don't have to pay the expensive rental fees like you do in a Part 141 program. And more often than not, you're dealing with real-world career pilots that got their start in teaching by instructing. So you're getting taught by a pilot that flies day in and day out as a career. This could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, but I don't see many downsides of it. So negatives, right? For every positive, we have to have some negatives. Since it's a small organization, many times you don't have the ability to change instructors, right? If you're dealing with a career pilot that teaches nights and weekends, if you leave, you're going to have to find a whole new pilot or an instructor to start that relationship over with. It's tough to get financing for these lessons if you're going to do it as a career. Part 61 really doesn't have any written syllabus besides what's laid out in the FARs. And most student loans require some sort of a syllabus to get them. So it's tough to get financing. I don't know of any Part 61 program that is VA approved. So if you plan on using your veterans benefits for training, Part 61 is not an option. And lastly, granted, there's some checks that you got to meet to become a Part 61 pilot to go for your check ride, but there's not any formal checks and balances like a 141 program. that you have to complete going through your training. Part 141 training. What is it? Well, it's the part of the FARS that lists out all the requirements that need to be met for a school to offer Part 141 training. This is in Part 141 of the FARS. Okay, some of the positives of Part 141 training is that it's highly regulated by the FAA. The FAA has to approve their training curriculum. It has to approve their airplanes. There's lots of checks and balances that need to be met to maintain Part 141 school requirements. Okay, there's lots of instructors normally available at a Part 141 school. Okay, so if you don't like one instructor, generally you can switch to a different one without going off to a completely different school like you would in a Part 61. Since there's a lot of instructors, there's generally a larger fleet of aircraft, right? So if you have lots of aircraft, generally you won't miss too many flights because of maintenance. When taking training in a Part 61 program, you only have one instructor and one airplane. If something goes down, you miss out on that training. So like I said earlier, there's an approved training curriculum that has to be approved by the FAA. And in that curriculum, there's a check and balance. So your instructor will be giving you training. And it's generally broke up into 3 stages, right? Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3, and then you have your end of course. So each one of these stages has a check ride involved in it, right? So your instructor gives you the training, make sure you're ready for Stage 1 check. The school has a check instructor. That check instructor gives you a test verbally, and then you have a flight, and it kind of prepares you for your FAA check ride. Okay, then there's a Stage 2, same thing. Your instructor gets you ready for it. Check instructor says whether you pass or not. Stage 3, and then when you go to the end of course, the check instructor will cover everything and then send you to the FAA. So there's a lot of checks and balances involved. Sometimes they use 2 or 3 different check instructors for each pilot that they're training through. So you have lots more opinions whether you're set and ready for the FAA check ride. Okay, since there is a lot of regulation and red tape through the FAA, it is easier to get financial aid for Part 141 training. Also, the VA normally recognizes Part 141 schools. Not all of them. The school has to get approved through the VA, but generally the VA approves Part 141 schools without too much issue. This can be a faster way to get your ratings. Okay, not so much in an hour sense, because I took my training in a Part 141 school. I grew up around farm equipment. I've driven, I've raced, I've done about everything you can think of, and it still took me 55 hours to become a private pilot. So don't think that when I'm saying you can get your ratings in a shorter amount of time in a 141 is because the hour requirements are less. It's because there's more aircraft availability. The school's open from generally 7:30 in the morning till 9 at night, and there's flights every day, so you can get pushed through quicker. There's more aircraft. There's less maintenance downtime. So that's why I'm saying you can get your ratings in a faster amount of time. Now, if you're going to become a career pilot, right? Generally, if you start with a school at your private rating or instrument rating or whatever rating you start at, and then you continue on with the school to complete all your ratings to become a CFI, most schools will hire you as a CFI if you can complete their program to become a CFI. So that's a good thing if you're going to become a career pilot. Some of the negatives, right? The biggest downside I can say to Part 141 schools is most of the instructors are low-time pilots, right? As soon as you get your commercial, you can go for your CFI. So you got pilots that have only 250 hours teaching you. And the reason they're teaching you is because your time goes towards them, and they're building their time to move on to a different flying career. Sometimes this is good, sometimes it's bad. Some instructors are great. They love teaching how to fly. Most people are just, a lot of instructors are just looking to go to the airlines, looking for that career change. And they're just dreading instruction, and you can tell it in their teaching. So, Part 141 programs are basically pilot factories, okay? They're very rigid business, corporately ran operations, right? So a lot of times the customer service is severely lacking in Part 141 programs. Everything has a charge associated to it. There's no good old boy friendship built. It's a very corporately run, money-based business. Not that that's a bad thing, but just be prepared for it. Also, the training may be the absolute minimum to meet FAA requirements. The reason I say this is there's some programs out there, and I don't want to throw Jeppesen under the bus or Cessna under the bus, that have a Part 141 approved curriculum, and some schools are just going to this curriculum like Jeppesen, having you go through it, and that meets their Part 141 requirement. There's not a lot of classroom stuff involved. You just have to go to each school in your area that is 141 rated or certified and make sure that their teaching style isn't some online module to meet their 141 requirement. Since they are a corporately based money-making operation, a lot of times there's higher cost involved. So just be ready for that. And there's less flexibility involved. Okay? 141 programs are very rigid. You got this flight lesson, you got to check that box. You go to the next flight lesson, you check that box. So you don't have near the flexibility you do in a Part 61 program. So that's some of the positives and negatives of Part 141. Be the best one for you to get your ticket? Well, that's a hard question for me to answer. And the reason I say that is I don't know what your aviation goals are. If you want to just go out for hamburgers at some exotic airports on the weekends in your own airplane, without a doubt, I'd look towards a Part 61 school. Find a local instructor that you like, a small mom and pop shop that's going to give you the training you need, get you through your FAA check ride, and be done with it. Now, if you're going to go to become more of a corporate pilot or go to the airlines, I would definitely go to a Part 141 school. And the reason I say that is in aviation, generally you have to go to private, instrument, commercial, and then get your CFI rating to build your time. And if you start a relationship with the school, generally when you're finished, they will hire you. I mean, you can go back and forth on this a million different ways, but in my opinion, if you're going to be a recreational pilot and not fly that often, I would go Part 61. Okay? If you're going to be a career pilot and you're starting off with 0 time and you want to make it a career, I'd go Part 141. That's my 2 cents. Hopefully this shed a little bit of light on Part 61 and Part 141. And I hope you look forward to the next video that's coming soon.